He hadn't smiled in 20 years, and she almost gave up on music until one song changed everything. Nathaniel Carter was a wealthy CEO, known more for his silence than his success. Haunted by the death of his twin sister, he built a life of routine, control, and carefully hidden grief. Emily Whitaker, a temporary secretary with a heart full of forgotten songs, arrived in his world by accident and changed it in ways no one saw coming. But what happens when two broken people cross paths, when one believes he's beyond saving, and the other isn't sure she's strong enough to stay? If it were you facing loss, shame, and the fear of feeling again, would you open your heart or keep the walls up forever? This is a story about memory, music, and the courage to sing again, even when your voice trembles. Stay with us until the end. You just might hear a song that reminds you of something you've forgotten. If this story touches you, leave a comment and let us know your favorite moment. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Now, let's begin. Where silence met its first note. He hadn't smiled in 20 years. Not once. Not since the day the car flipped on the icy road and his sister never came back. That winter had been merciless gray skies sagging low over Asheville, North Carolina, snow piling on the winding mountain roads like powdered silence. The accident was quick, a missed curve, a scream, shattered glass. Then, the quiet that stuck around long after the sirens had faded. Nathaniel Carter was 25 then, just a kid, really, but loss hardens quickly in young men who feel too much and say too little. The funeral was private. The grief wasn't. 20 years later, he was still CEO of Carter Haven, living a successful chain of senior living facilities that prided itself on security, dignity, and calm. People said he was a genius with numbers, brilliant with logistics, but no one said he was warm. No one remembered his smile. He arrived at the office every morning at exactly 7:05 a.m., coffee black, no sugar, briefings precise, no small talk, office silent, save for the tapping of keyboards and the humming of printers. And if you passed him in the hallway, you nodded, maybe said good morning, but never expected more than a stiff, quiet nod in return. The portraits on his office wall showed plaques, handshakes, magazine covers, not a single one with laughter, not even one with a smile. The only person who dared speak more than 3 sentences to him in a row was Clarence. Clarence was 82 years old and had lived in Carter Haven's Asheville facility for the last 7. He was sharp, especially for a man who'd seen the Great Depression, Vietnam, and 2 hip replacements. Every Thursday, Nathaniel visited the facility in person, not because he had to, but because his sister used to volunteer there, and visiting was his quiet way of keeping her alive. Clarence would always be waiting in the sunroom, sipping lukewarm chamomile tea from a mug that said, "World's okayest grandpa." Nathaniel never skipped that visit, even though their conversations were more Clarence than Carter. "You ever gonna paint that office of yours something other than corporate gray?" Clarence would mutter, flipping through a worn Reader's Digest. Nathaniel would raise an eyebrow, maybe tilt the corner of his mouth just a bit, but the smile never came. "You know," Clarence said one Thursday in late March, "people your age are out there laughing at cat videos and drinking fancy coffee with foam. And here you are, stuck in a suit so tight it could iron itself." Nathaniel glanced at his navy tie, adjusted it slightly. Clarence leaned forward, eyes narrowing not with judgment, but with something quieter, softer. "When's the last time you laughed, son?" It wasn't the kind of question Nathaniel expected, not from Clarence, not from anyone. It hit like cold air after stepping out of a hot shower, sharp, real. He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Clarence just nodded slowly and looked out the window. "That's what I thought." Back in the office that evening, the fluorescent lights buzzed quietly. The hallway was empty. Even Mrs. Gibbons, the ever-vigilant HR director, had already gone home. Nathaniel sat at his desk, staring at an untouched folder of reports. The numbers blurred together. His mind wandered back to the question, "When's the last time you laughed?" He thought about the night of the accident, the snow, the dark road, the moment before it all broke. He remembered his sister's voice. She had been singing something light and silly from the radio, off key as always. Her laugh echoed as she teased him for being too serious, for driving like a grandpa. Then came the curve, the slip, the silence. And ever since then, silence had been easier. Nathaniel shut the folder, stood, and walked over to the window. From this height, Asheville looked like a snow globe someone forgot to shake. Still, cold, untouched. He sighed. The next morning, a soft knock interrupted his thoughts as he entered the main office. Mrs. Gibbons poked her head in. Your new temp is here. Emily Whitaker, from Tennessee. She's different. Nathaniel glanced up. Different how Mrs. Gibbons blinked. You'll see. Emily was waiting in the reception area, humming to herself and tapping her foot. She wore a green cardigan that didn't match her floral dress, and her purse had a keychain shaped like a banjo. She stood up too quickly when she saw him, nearly knocking over the vase of plastic daisies on the front desk. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Was that real water? No. Okay, good. Nathaniel blinked, and then he heard it, a tune, barely audible, but familiar. She was humming the same song his sister had sung all those years ago. He didn't say anything, not yet, but something inside him shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a window cracked just enough to let spring air in. She wasn't hired for her typing speed. In fact, she got the address wrong on day one. Emily Whitaker had packed up her entire life into the back of a rust-colored Subaru, taken a wrong turn somewhere outside of Knoxville, and still showed up to the Carter Haven corporate office 15 minutes early with coffee-stained khakis and a smile like spring. She carried too many tote bags. She talked to the security guard like they were old friends, and when she walked past the receptionist's desk, she let out a quiet hum, off-key, unapologetic, and entirely heartfelt. Morning, she chirped, even though it was cloudy and no one else seemed particularly pleased to be there. Mrs. Gibbons had raised an eyebrow during orientation. You're temporary, dear. Don't get too comfortable. But Emily only smiled. I just want to be helpful. And maybe learn a thing or two. She didn't know how to program the office phone. She misspelled confidential in an email subject line. And during her first team meeting, she handed Nathaniel a file upside down, then blurted out, Oopsie happens to the best of us. There was a long silence. Someone coughed. Nathaniel didn't flinch, but he didn't scold her either. Later, that same day, Emily spent her lunch break in the break room warming up leftover chicken pot pie and humming an old country tune from the 70s, a song her mother used to sing while making biscuits on Sunday mornings. It was her comfort song, her thinking song, the one that filled the silence when homesickness crept in. What she didn't know was that just outside the break room door, Nathaniel Carter had paused. He didn't mean to eavesdrop. He'd meant to grab a bottle of water before his next meeting. But the tune stopped him. That melody it scratched at the locked door of his memory. Something soft, distant. A harmony not heard in years. He stood still, one hand resting lightly on the doorknob. His breath caught somewhere between confusion and recognition. Inside, Emily stirred her lunch, completely unaware. And I'll keep singing, even if no one hears, she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel blinked. That line, that exact lyric. It was from a B-side track of a long-forgotten Loretta Lynn album, his sister's favorite. She used to belt it out, barefoot in the kitchen, waving a wooden spoon like a microphone. She had taught it to him once, insisted he learn the words. He never had, but he remembered the way she laughed when he tried. And now, here it was again. The same song, from the lips of a woman he'd known for barely 24 hours. He didn't realize the corners of his mouth had lifted just slightly. A curve, a flicker, not quite a smile, but something dangerously close. He turned before anyone could see and walked back down the hall, hands in his pockets, heart beating oddly fast. The next day, something shifted. Emily came in carrying banana bread wrapped in a checkered napkin. She offered slices to everyone, including the cleaning staff. She refilled the coffee pot without being asked. She complimented someone's earrings in the elevator and remembered the name of the intern's dog. People started to warm to her, not all at once, but in those small, grudging ways offices often do. Laughter bubbled out of the break room more than once. And when she bumped into Nathaniel in the hallway and apologized for the 5th time in 2 days, he didn't roll his eyes. He just nodded, quietly, and kept walking. But not before Emily noticed the faintest twitch at the edge of his mouth. By Friday, it was Mrs. Gibbons who noticed first. "I think he smiled," she whispered to a colleague over lunch. Just for a second, the colleague leaned in. "At who, Mrs.?" Gibbons raised her eyebrows. "At her, the temp." And so the rumor began. By Monday, it had turned into a quiet buzz, something unspoken but ever present. The CEO smiled. No way. It was because of that new girl, Emily. She must have done something. Maybe she's related to someone on the board, or maybe she just sings. But Emily didn't seem to notice the whispers, or if she did, she chose to ignore them. She kept humming in the break room, kept passing out banana bread, kept offering help in ways that weren't flashy but quietly kind. She organized the storage closet without being asked. She remembered birthdays. She made coffee just the way Clarence liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. Nathaniel, meanwhile, started lingering longer near the kitchen, staring a little too long at his office door before entering. Something about the building felt different, less like a mausoleum, more like a place where someone, somewhere, might laugh again. And though he said nothing, though he kept his tie perfectly knotted and his shoes perfectly polished, the staff swore they saw him glance toward Emily once or twice with a look that wasn't quite disapproval. Maybe curiosity. That week ended with a board meeting. Emily wasn't scheduled to attend. She wasn't even supposed to be near the conference room. But a last-minute schedule mix-up landed her there with a tray of water glasses and a notepad she barely knew how to use. As she set the glasses down, her hand shook. One of the cups tipped, splashing cool water across Nathaniel's papers. "Oh my gosh. Oh no. I'm so sorry." Everyone froze. Emily fumbled with napkins, cheeks flushed. Nathaniel looked down at the wet page. Then slowly, so slowly he looked up at her. And then something unexpected happened. He exhaled quietly, almost like a sigh, and for the briefest second, his eyes softened. He didn't smile, not quite, but he didn't scowl either. Emily stood there, napkins in hand, breath caught, but he just nodded, ever so slightly, and turned back to the meeting. That night, the whispers turned into full-blown murmurs. Did you hear she spilled water on the CEO and he didn't fire her? No. He smiled. No one knew why he asked for her to assist at the board meeting. She spilled coffee on the presentation slides. It wasn't her finest moment. The tray had been too heavy, the conference room too quiet, the table too glossy. The papers absorbed the spill like a sponge, and the room collectively held its breath. Emily froze, clutching a damp napkin, eyes wide behind her smudged glasses. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." Nathaniel didn't say a word. He looked down at the coffee-stained charts, then up at her expression, unreadable. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, he calmly slid the papers aside, turned to the screen, and continued his report as if nothing had happened. The board members blinked in surprise. Emily backed away slowly, heart thudding, but before she slipped out, she caught the faintest flicker of something in his eyes. Not annoyance, not amusement, either. Something else. Recognition. That week, they started crossing paths more often. Once, in the elevator, she fumbled to press the lobby button and accidentally hit the emergency stop. The elevator jolted to a halt. Emily gasped. "Oh, Lord have mercy. I think I broke it." Nathaniel, standing stiffly in the corner, cleared his throat. "You didn't?" She looked up at him, cheeks flushed. Well, it was fine until I got in. He almost said something but the corner of his mouth twitched again before he turned away. Another time, she caught him at the vending machine, standing in front of the candy bar row, unmoving. Trouble deciding, she asked lightly. I don't eat these, he replied, not looking at her. Emily tilted her head. Then why stare at them like they owe you money? This time, he glanced over at just a flash of eye contact, but it lingered longer than expected. After that, it became a rhythm. Quiet, unspoken. She'd hum, and he'd pause near the break room. She'd joke, and he wouldn't laugh, but he'd stop walking. She never quite fit in with the rest of the office. Too friendly, too clumsy, too open. But somehow, she didn't seem to notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. Nathaniel, on the other hand, had spent 2 decades perfecting the art of fitting only where necessary. Never too much, never too close. He watched her from a safe distance, trying to decide if her kindness was genuine, or just another kind of performance. One afternoon, Emily dropped off documents at the Carter Haven Asheville facility. It was supposed to be a quick stop sign here. Hand off that, smile and wave. But Clarence caught her before she could escape. You're the singer, he said, pointing a shaky finger at her. The one who hums Loretta Lynn like she means it. Emily laughed, guilty as charged. Clarence patted the seat beside him. Sit a while. I don't bite. She sat. They talked about weather, biscuits, Tennessee tomatoes, about how hard it was to find good music on the radio anymore, and eventually, about Nathaniel. He used to come here every week with his sister, Clarence said, eyes cloudy with memory. She was a wild one, brought tambourines, made us dance like fools. Emily blinked. Sister. He nodded. His twin. Took care of everybody but herself. One winter, she didn't make it home. The words landed like a dropped glass. Quiet, but sharp. He stopped smiling after that. Clarence continued, stopped laughing, stopped living. Far as I could tell. Emily's heart tightened. Suddenly, the silences made sense. The stillness. The pauses that felt heavy, not cold. Clarence looked at her. But then you showed up, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. She didn't know what to say. Her throat felt dry, so she smiled, softly. I just hum songs. That's all. Sometimes, Clarence said, that's exactly what a soul needs. That night, Emily sat at her kitchen table, a half-eaten grilled cheese on her plate, and her laptop open to a half-written email to Mrs. Gibbons. Subject line request for early resignation. She'd written the first paragraph twice. She didn't feel cut out for this place. She couldn't keep up. She'd embarrassed herself enough. But then she thought of Clarence and Nathaniel, silent beside the vending machine, and the way her humming seemed to make the halls a little less hollow. Maybe she didn't need to perform. Maybe she didn't need to prove herself. Maybe she just needed to show up as she was and let that be enough. She deleted the draft. The next morning, she didn't wear the professional blazer that made her itch. She wore her favorite soft cardigan and pinned a daisy to her ID badge. She didn't bring a portfolio. She brought banana muffins. She didn't try to impress anyone. She just sat at her desk, humming a tune, typing slowly but steadily, smiling at the cleaning lady as she passed, and for the first time since she arrived, she didn't feel like she had to be anyone but Emily. Across the office, Nathaniel stood in his doorway, watching for just a moment longer than usual. Something about the way she moved light, present, real, pulled at a place inside him he thought he'd buried long ago. She didn't mean for the stapler to fly across the room or to trip over the copy machine, but both happened before lunch. The stapler had been jammed. Emily, determined to fix it, gave it a little too much enthusiasm. It launched from her hand, bounced off a filing cabinet, and landed with a clunk on the break room table. A pause. Then laughter soft at first, then fuller. Not from Nathaniel, of course. but from two junior staffers who had been silently microwaving soup, even Mrs. Gibbons cracked a half smile behind her ever-disapproving coffee mug. Later that same day, Emily caught her shoelace on the edge of the copy machine. It wasn't a dramatic fall, more of a slow, helpless tilt, arms flailing, a muttered, "Oh no, not again," as she landed in a surprisingly graceful seated position beside the recycling bin. Someone helped her up. She grinned, hair askew. "Guess I'm just keeping morale up. One disaster at a time." By Friday, she was unofficially known as the singing temp who falls a lot. And oddly, people liked her for it. It wasn't that Emily tried to be funny. She didn't. But there was something disarming about her. Something honest. She made mistakes without shame. She apologized when she needed to. She asked for help. And she didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. The office, which had always echoed with the sterile hum of productivity, began to warm. People lingered longer in the kitchen. Someone brought in donuts on Wednesday. A birthday card for the mailroom clerk made its rounds for the first time in months. And though Nathaniel never joined the small talk, he watched. He noticed how Emily asked about people's families and remembered their answers, how she hummed when she filed papers, how she sang softly just for herself when she thought no one was listening. She reminded him of life before the silence, before the polished boardrooms and airtight schedules, before the grief had set in like concrete. One Thursday afternoon, the skies turned dark with summer rain. A flash flood warning went out around 3 p.m. And by 5, most of the staff had rushed home, dodging puddles and traffic alerts. Emily, of course, had misplaced her umbrella and her keys and her phone charger. By the time she realized she'd be stuck until the worst passed, only one other car remained in the lot, Nathaniel's. She found him in the break room, standing stiffly near the window, watching the rain slide down in tired streaks. "Didn't think you'd still be here," she said. Voice light. He didn't turn. "I don't like driving in this kind of weather." She nodded. "Me neither." There was a long silence, not the awkward kind, but the kind that asked for no explanation. Emily sat in one of the chairs by the round table, pulling her knees up and wrapping her arms around them. "You ever notice how quiet rain makes everything inside feel?" Nathaniel finally glanced at her. "Quieter than usual?" She smiled. "A little sad. Yeah. Like the whole world's holding its breath." Another pause. Then, almost without thinking, she began to hum. It wasn't upbeat or polished, just a gentle lullaby one her grandmother used to sing when storms shook the windows and she couldn't sleep. She didn't sing for attention. She didn't look at him. She just sang to the quiet, to the walls, to the rain. Nathaniel remained by the window, unmoving, but his shoulders lowered, just slightly. His eyes closed, briefly. The song wound to a soft finish. Emily let the final note fade, then looked down at her hands. "I guess I just sing when I don't know what else to do." Nathaniel didn't answer, but he didn't leave. They sat like that for a long while. The only sound was the patter of rain and the hum of an old vending machine. That night, Nathaniel returned to his home, a minimalist townhouse with clean lines and quiet corners. He poured a glass of water, turned on a small lamp, and sat at his desk. He opened the company's server on his laptop, searching through internal video files, recordings from training sessions and employee events. He found one from last week, the break room camera routine footage for security, normally unremarkable. But there she was, Emily, alone, humming, sitting with her lunch, gently tapping her fingers to the rhythm of a tune no one else remembered. Nathaniel clicked play, then again, then once more. The melody filled the room soft, unassuming, and somehow the house didn't feel quite so quiet. The last person who sang that song to him was buried under snow. It was the kind of memory that never faded, not even after 20 years, not even with silence stacked like bricks around it. Her name was Rachel, his twin. They had shared everything: birthdays, books, scraped knees, terrible high school dance moves. She was the louder one, the bolder one, the one who could pull him out of any mood with just a look or a laugh. And she sang, all the time. Singing wasn't just something Rachel did. It was how she was. She sang when she cooked. She sang when she vacuumed. She sang to strangers, to dogs, to trees in the fall. And on that final night driving back from the cabin, the sky already darkening, the road glossed with hidden ice, she had sung that old Loretta Lynn tune, the one Emily now hummed without knowing. He'd told her to keep both hands on the wheel. She'd rolled her eyes, laughed, and belted out the next line louder. Then came the turn. The tires lost grip, the metal twisted, the glass screamed, and when he woke up, she was gone. Nathaniel never sang again after that, never even listened to music with lyrics. He'd built his life out of spreadsheets and safety protocols, layered over with respectability and measured silence. Carter Haven was the one thing he could control, a place where nothing would fall apart, where no one would die alone, where everything had its proper place. He never talked about Rachel, not to family, not to therapists, not even to his father, who now lived quietly at Carter Haven, Asheville, his memory dissolving day by day. But when Emily sang that same song, the walls cracked, just a little, enough for the echo of Rachel's laugh to slip through. Emily didn't know all this, not in full. But she felt it in the way Nathaniel froze at certain lyrics, in the way his eyes clouded when someone mentioned the word sister, in how he sometimes looked like he was waiting for a voice he hadn't heard in years. She didn't press him, but she listened, and she noticed. One afternoon, while sorting invoices, she overheard Clarence talking to another resident in the hallway. They were like two halves of the same heart. Those twins, he said, losing her. That boy hasn't been the same since, built this whole empire, but forgot how to live. Emily paused, fingers still on the keyboard. She had known loss too, not as sudden, not as violent. Her mother had faded like a photograph left in the sun, slow, almost gentle. Alzheimer's took her in pieces, first names, then faces, then songs. In the final year, she had stopped speaking entirely. But some nights, when Emily sang the old lullabies, her mother's lips would move, no sound, just the shape of memory. That was the last real connection they had. So when Emily looked at Nathaniel, she didn't see a cold man. She saw someone still caught in the fog of grief, someone who'd tried to protect himself so fiercely that he'd walled off the very things that could heal him. And she understood that kind of hurt, the kind you carry in your bones. The next morning, the office felt unusually still. A meeting had been canceled. Rain was coming again. People moved more quietly than usual. Emily sat at her desk, watching droplets gather on the window. She thought about all the things she couldn't say to Nathaniel, about loss, about memory, about how music sometimes speaks when words fail. So she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of stationary ivory with soft green edges. She wrote slowly, not a letter, not a note, just lyrics, new ones. She took that old Loretta Lynn tune and reimagined it, not polished, not poetic, but honest. Words about memory, about echoes, about finding pieces of someone in unexpected places. She wrote, "If you still hear her in the song, you don't have to sing alone." She signed it only with a small treble clef. No name, no explanation. Then she stood, walked to his office, and slid the paper under the door. No knock, no announcement, just the sound of rain behind her and the quiet beating of her heart. Nathaniel didn't notice the note until hours later. He'd been pacing. The day had felt off, too quiet, too full. He couldn't focus on numbers, couldn't shake the echo of that song, of Rachel's voice colliding with Emily's. They weren't the same, but they weren't entirely different, either. When he finally opened the envelope, the words hit him like wind through a long sealed room. He sat down, read them once, then again. He didn't cry, but he closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he let himself feel the weight of missing her, not as punishment, not as guilt, just as love. The internet eats people alive, especially when they smile at the wrong person. It started with a blurry photo. Nathaniel and Emily, sitting on a bench in the city park near Carter Haven, Asheville. It had been a warm afternoon, unusually so for April, and the cherry blossoms had opened early that year. They'd both ended up there by accident, taking lunch outdoors to escape the hum of fluorescent lights. Someone passing by had noticed them. Two people sitting close. A woman laughing with her head tilted back. A man, Nathaniel Carter, smiling. Actually smiling. The photo caught that exact second. Then came the video. Only 10 seconds long. She touched his arm, and he didn't move away. It was enough. By the next morning, the clip had been posted anonymously under a snide caption, "Billionaire CEO caught cozy with new secretary. Gold digger or genuine." It spread like wildfire, first in internal Slack threads, then among Carter Haven employees. Then, the wider internet. People were hungry for a story, and they found one. The board of directors wasn't amused. Mrs. Gibbons called an emergency meeting. Emily was summoned to HR at 8:00 sharp. Nathaniel said nothing. Emily arrived in her usual soft cardigan, face pale but composed. She'd seen the clip, heard the whispers. Her inbox had filled overnight with links, half-curious messages, and one scathing comment from a fellow assistant. Didn't take long for you to climb the ladder. Inside the conference room, the air was stiff with accusation. "We need to protect the company's reputation," one board member said, adjusting his glasses. Another leaned forward. "Are you in a personal relationship with Mr. Carter?" Emily blinked. "No." "Did he show you favoritism?" "No." "Have you?" "She brought him back to life," Clarence had said once. But no one here cared about life, only optics. They questioned her for 20 minutes. Nathaniel sat at the end of the table, expression unreadable. He didn't look at her. He didn't speak, not once. And that, somehow, hurt more than the questions. When it ended, Mrs. Gibbons escorted her out with a polite, distant nod. "You'll be placed on leave until further notice." Emily said nothing, just gathered her tote bag and her silence. The office was quieter than usual that afternoon. People typed slower, walked softer. Nathaniel stood at the window of his corner office, watching rain gather on the glass. Again, the weather mirrored the mood, overcast, tense, familiar. His phone buzzed, a message from his father's nurse. "Daniel's asking for the woman who sings. Says she promised to bring the little guitar again." Nathaniel closed his eyes. He remembered the day Emily had brought that ukulele, barely bigger than a shoebox, into the memory care unit. She'd played a soft tune. His father had tapped his fingers in rhythm. One of the nurses had cried. That had been the first time Nathaniel saw something other than confusion in his father's eyes. Music had reached what memory could not. Emily didn't return home right away. She went to the Carter Haven facility instead. Walked past the reception desk, past the flower arrangements, past the framed certificates. The staff greeted her gently, not with pity, but something quieter, like mourning. She made her way to the common room. Daniel was sitting in his usual chair, a blanket across his knees. He looked up, smiled. "You came?" She nodded. "I promised. Didn't I?" She didn't stay long, just long enough to sit beside him, pull out the small ukulele, and play one final lullaby. No words, just notes, just presence. When she stood to leave, she placed the instrument gently on the table beside his chair. "No need to return it," she whispered. He didn't ask why. Back at the office, Nathaniel sat at his desk long after the building had emptied. The envelope she'd left for him days earlier still rested unopened beside the keyboard. He hadn't said anything in that meeting, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to fight something he couldn't explain. He thought silence was safer, cleaner, professional. But now, the silence felt like betrayal. He opened the envelope. Inside was a second sheet of lyrics, new ones. This time, they weren't rewritten, just the original chorus. Simple, raw. If you still hear her in the song, you don't have to sing alone. Beneath it, a single word. Goodbye. The chair was empty. The song was gone. The silence returned like winter. It settled over the office slowly like snow on an abandoned porch. At first, no one said anything, just glanced toward her desk, half expecting to see her cardigan draped on the chair, her humming floating faintly over the clack of keyboards. But the desk stayed clean, and the silence stayed still. Nathaniel noticed it most in the in-between moments, when he walked past the break room and heard only the low hum of the refrigerator, when he stepped into the elevator and no one fumbled with the buttons, when he passed the front desk and didn't hear a voice cheerfully mispronounce his last name. He hadn't realized how much space she took up until she was gone. Even the vending machine seemed quieter. At Carter Haven, Asheville, the residents noticed too. "Where's the girl with the green sweater?" one asked. "She sings on Tuesdays." Another murmured, "Today's Tuesday." Clarence, sitting in the sunroom with his tea, sighed. That one wasn't just a voice. She was a heartbeat. Daniel? Nathaniel's father didn't say anything at first, but after a long while, he looked toward the doorway and whispered, "She left her music here." That evening, Clarence called Nathaniel, not texted, not emailed, called. Nathaniel almost didn't answer, but something, intuition or guilt, pushed his finger to the green button. "Got something for you," Clarence said without introduction. Then came the sound of soft static. A recording. Emily's voice. She was singing not to perform, but to soothe. The kind of song you sing to someone falling asleep. A slow waltz, familiar and old. Each word dipped in memory. In the background, faint laughter, coughs, a spoon clinking in a mug. Then her voice again, not sung this time, but spoken. "Even if he never smiles again, I'd still sing." The line caught in Nathaniel's chest like a breath he couldn't exhale. She hadn't said his name, but she didn't need to. He didn't sleep that night. The house felt colder, larger. He stood by the window, holding his phone, replaying that final sentence until the battery dimmed. He thought of the day in the park, the bench under the blooming trees, the softness in her voice, the ease of it all. He thought of the meeting room. How he'd sat there, stone-faced, watching them question her. How he'd let the silence speak louder than any defense. It wasn't that he didn't believe her. It was that he didn't believe he deserved her. And now, she was gone. The next morning, Nathaniel walked into his office at 6:55, 10 minutes earlier than usual. He sat behind his desk, opened his laptop, and typed just one line into the company calendar: personal leave indefinite. Then he picked up his keys, his coat, and the small envelope still resting on the corner of his desk, the one she had left with the lyrics inside. He held it like a compass. It took some asking around. A few calls to the volunteer department, one long conversation with a nurse named Deborah, who remembered Emily's laugh. By sunset, he was on the road, driving west, headed toward a little town where, someone said, there was a community center that held music nights for the elderly, free of charge, run by volunteers, with one woman who always stayed late to help clean up, and always sang the last song as if it were the first. The rain returned sometime after midnight, but this time, Nathaniel didn't mind the sound. He hadn't worn the company's bear costume in 15 years, but today, he needed it. It was wrinkled from years in storage. One of the ears had collapsed inward. A button on the vest was missing, but it still smelled faintly of cinnamon and mothballs, like the early days of Carter Haven, when everything had been less polished but more real. Back then, the bear had a name, Mr. Barrington. Rachel had made him wear it to every fundraiser. "You're too serious." She'd tease. No one trusts a man who never smiles, but everyone trusts a bear in a vest. He'd groaned and rolled his eyes, but she was right. Kids loved it. Seniors clapped when he danced badly. And Rachel. She laughed loudest of all. After she died, the bear disappeared, until now. Nathaniel stared at himself in the mirror, suit and tie hidden beneath faux fur. He looked ridiculous, but strangely, it didn't feel wrong. He pulled the bear head on, grabbed his keys, and stepped into the fading afternoon light. The drive to the community center took over 2 hours. It sat just outside a quiet town nestled in the hills, the kind of place with hand-painted shop signs and neighbors who waved from their porches. The GPS lost signal 3 times. He didn't turn back. By the time he arrived, the sky had begun to bruise with evening. From the parking lot, he could hear voices inside, not perfect but full. Laughter, a stray piano note, the rising and falling rhythm of people untrained in pitch but rich in heart. And floating above them, Emily's voice. Sure, gentle, familiar. Nathaniel paused at the door, then took a breath, adjusted the costume's sagging zipper, and stepped inside. Gasps. That was the first reaction. Then came chuckles, then applause. Is that the Carter Bear? Someone asked, clapping their hands with glee. A woman in a wheelchair lit up. I haven't seen Mr. Barrington since 2009. The room buzzed with delight. No one asked why he was there. They simply welcomed him, laughing, clapping, patting his fuzzy arms. And Emily? She was behind the piano, her fingers frozen over the keys, eyes locked on the bear, her mouth parted slightly. Her breath caught. He waved, big, slow, silly. She didn't move. Then someone in the room began singing again. Others joined in. The melody stumbled but found its footing. They sang louder. As the chorus swelled, the bear stepped forward awkward, warm, very human beneath all that fur. Then, in the middle of the room, he reached up and slowly removed the head. Emily blinked. It was him, hair tousled, cheeks flushed, tie loosened beneath the bear suit. Nathaniel looked directly at her. The room fell quiet, but he didn't notice anyone else. He took a step forward. Then another, and in the hush that followed, he spoke, voice low but steady. You made me smile, and I never want to lose that again. He wasn't good with speeches, never had been, but those 2 lines were everything he needed to say. Emily's eyes shimmered. Her hands dropped from the piano to her lap. She stood slowly, the kind of slow where you're unsure if you're dreaming. Her lips trembled not from sadness, but from the weight of being seen. Truly, finally seen. I thought I broke something, she said quietly. Back there, at the office. You didn't? He replied. You fixed something. I just didn't realize it until you were gone. Someone in the back let out a soft aw, followed by a clap. Then others joined in, gentle, encouraging. A crowd full of people who'd lived long enough to know what courage looked like when it walked in, late and awkwardly dressed as a bear. Emily stepped forward. Nathaniel held out the envelope she had once left on his desk, the one with the lyrics. I never let it go, he said. Not really? She took it, fingers brushing his. Then, tears spilling now. She laughed a small, surprised sound and whispered, You still owe me a dance, Mr. Barrington. He smiled. I know. The music picked up again. Someone tapped a tambourine. The group resumed singing, this time with more heart than melody. Emily sat back at the piano. But this time, Nathaniel stood beside her, not just listening, being present. This time, when he smiled, he meant it. It wasn't a polite gesture, not the kind of mechanical smile you give when someone finishes a quarterly report. This smile had roots. It rose slowly, passed through memory, weathered the ache of years, and landed gently across his face like sunlight through old curtains. For Nathaniel Carter, the man once known for silence, it was nothing short of a miracle. 1 year had passed since he showed up in a bear costume. Since that day, everything changed, not all at once. Healing rarely works that way, but little by little, thread by thread, something fragile had been rewoven. Nathaniel no longer ran Carter Haven from the top floor. He had stepped down as CEO, citing a desire to serve differently. The board was skeptical at first, but his choice of successor, a kind-eyed woman with a background in elder care, won them over. He stayed on in a quieter role. No titles, no press, just presence. Each Thursday, He and Emily hosted Music in Memory, a free program at the Carter Haven Asheville campus. The room wasn't fancy, just stackable chairs, a beat-up piano, a whiteboard with lyrics scribbled in colored markers. The sound system crackled sometimes. The coffee pot leaked, but it was always full. Retirees, memory care residents, veterans with slow hands, grandmothers who hadn't sung since childhood all gathered there. Not for perfection, but for connection. And at the front of the room were two people who had found something precious in the most unexpected place. Emily, soft-spoken but radiant, led the songs. Nathaniel, just slightly offbeat but always attentive, kept rhythm on a wooden shaker or gentle hand drum. They never made a show of anything, but the love between them was unmistakable, woven into every glance, every shared smile, every silence that now felt like comfort, not absence. They call them the song and the silence. Clarence told a visiting volunteer one morning, a twinkle in his eye. Guess which one's which? Nathaniel, hearing that from across the room, just chuckled and kept shaking his little maraca. After one session, while most of the group drifted toward the cookies and lemonade, Emily lingered behind, reorganizing sheet music. Nathaniel came up beside her, brushing his hand gently against her elbow. "You know," she said, without looking up, "this almost didn't happen." He tilted his head. The program. She shook her head, smiling faintly. Me? I had a job offer in Oregon, a little bookstore near my aunt's farm. Thought I'd start over, change my name, maybe raise goats. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Goats? Emily shrugged. It was either that or become a florist in Vermont. He laughed, full and unguarded. So, why didn't you go? She turned to face him then, her gaze steady. Because the day I left the office, I realized I wasn't just walking away from pain. I was walking away from something unfinished. He didn't speak, but his hand found hers. Emily added, I stayed because music brought something back to life in both of us, and I wanted to see what that could grow into. Daniel Carter, Nathaniel's father, had begun humming again. It wasn't always on cue, and sometimes it was the same note repeated over and over. But when Emily played a certain 1950s tune, his foot tapped along. The nurses said it was the most responsive he'd been in months. Clarence said it best one day as he leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, listening to the room swirl with laughter and off-key harmonies. Sometimes people think healing looks like walking again, or remembering everything. But this, he gestured toward the piano, this is healing, people showing up, singing, even if their voice shakes. That's how we keep each other alive. Nathaniel had stopped counting years. He no longer measured time by quarters and fiscal calendars. Now he measured by moments, the soft hush before a song, the way Emily looked at him over the piano, the echo of 80-year-olds clapping on beat. He still missed Rachel, every day. But the pain was no longer a sharp edge. It was something rounder now, something he could carry. And sometimes when the room was quiet and everyone had gone, he imagined she was still there, laughing at his terrible rhythm, proud of the man he had become. At the close of one session, as chairs were being stacked and songbooks put away, Clarence pulled Emily aside. He looked at her with the same quiet kindness he always carried. You know, he said softly, some music never ends. Emily paused. What do you mean? He smiled, tapping his chest with 2 fingers. It just finds new voices. Some songs are never really sung, until someone sings them for you. It was a bright Saturday in late spring. The air held the gentle promise of warmth, not yet summer, but no longer winter. Dogwoods bloomed around the park benches, and the lake shimmered like it had been waiting for this very moment. This was where it all began, and this was where it would come full circle. The community event was small, no banners, no corporate logos, just folding chairs, laughter, and a handful of familiar faces, some wrinkled with time, some softened by memory. Residents from Carter Haven were there, bundled in light cardigans, clapping their hands to invisible beats. A few of the office staff had come, too curious, maybe hopeful. Clarence sat front row, arms crossed but eyes shining. And at the center of it all, a small makeshift stage built from wooden pallets and borrowed rugs. Emily stepped up first. She wore a soft blue dress and her usual calm smile. Her hair fluttered gently in the breeze as she adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd, not with nerves, but with quiet certainty. She nodded once. Nathaniel followed. He carried the guitar gently like it was made of something holy. It wasn't fancy. Just an old acoustic one of the residents had donated to the music program. But in his hands, it felt right. Nathaniel had never played in public before. He'd practiced late at night, fumbled with chords, let calluses form on fingers that used to sign contracts. Every note was imperfect but honest. He sat beside Emily, adjusted the strap, and strummed once. The sound wavered slightly, but held. Emily smiled at him, and then, in the hush before the first lyric, something shifted. The song was old, older than either of them. A country tune Rachel used to hum when washing dishes, when dancing barefoot in the kitchen, when trying to coax her brother out of his mood. It wasn't famous, no chart-topping ballad, just a simple melody about holding on, about letting go, about finding your way home through someone else's voice. But today, it was his song. Nathaniel played, Emily sang, and for the first time, the music didn't ache, it healed. The crowd fell still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Daniel Carter, sitting beside a nurse, began tapping one foot. His eyes didn't drift this time. He was watching. One woman wept softly. Another clutched her husband's hand. Clarence, of all people, was smiling. Emily's voice rose gently with each verse, like waves against a dock, never loud, just steady. And Nathaniel, though a few notes were rough, never once looked away from her. Halfway through, he looked up from the strings. She was looking at him, really looking, like she always had. And then it happened. He smiled, not a quick flash, not a half-hearted twitch, a real smile, wide, open, full of something new, and something long lost. Emily's voice faltered for half a second. Then she reached out, still singing, and gently took his free hand in hers. The moment settled around them like a soft blanket. When the final chord faded, the silence didn't rush in, it tiptoed, and then, applause warm, slow, deeply earned. Emily leaned closer and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "That's the smile I was waiting for." He didn't answer, he just kept holding her hand. Afterward, people stayed longer than they needed to. Some shared stories, others hugged without speaking. Someone requested they make this a tradition. Emily laughed. "We'll see." Nathaniel looked at her and said, "We will." As the sun dipped lower behind the trees, the last of the folding chairs were gathered, and the guitar was gently packed away. Clarence stood up slowly, stretched, and said, mostly to himself, "I've seen a lot in my time, but nothing quite like a man who found his voice by listening. Healing doesn't always come from medicine. Sometimes it comes from a song sung just right, from silence finally broken, from memory that refuses to fade, from one hand reaching for another, when neither is quite sure what comes next. But they reach anyway, because love, like music, doesn't end. It just finds a new verse. Sometimes, healing doesn't arrive in grand moments. It comes in quiet laughter, in a song softly sung, in the presence of someone who sees past your silence. Nathaniel and Emily's story reminds us that no heart is too closed, and no pain too deep, for hope to find its way back in. We all carry losses, people we miss, things we wish we'd done differently. But love often returns not in fireworks, but in the form of gentle companionship, clumsy kindness, and a melody that feels like home. As we grow older, it's easy to believe that our best moments are behind us, but healing and connection don't follow a timeline. Sometimes, the most important chapters come later, when we've stopped trying to be perfect and started allowing ourselves to simply be present. So, if you're still waiting for joy to return, let this story be your reminder, It's never too late to smile again, or to let someone sing your name into the silence. Thank you for sharing your time and heart with us today. If this story touched something deep within you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who needs a little light, and subscribing to our channel for more heartfelt stories like this. Your support means the world and helps keep these moments of connection alive. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself and each other.